All right, everybody, welcome to Red Grace Live. My name is Emilio Ramos. It's always good to be with you guys. And of course, Micah Whitehead is here.
Hello,
Micah,
Emilio.
you're looking good. You little cold, little flu, you little sickness, but you recovered.
I've been under the weather for quite some time, but now, ready to hit the ground running. It's a new year. Let's get this thing on the road.
We haven't recorded in a little while.
No, it's, between Christmas and Thanksgiving and being sick, it's just I've been like, sorry, Emilio, can't record, can't go live.
I know.
So it's been
story of my life.
Yes, of course.
I don't want to be, I don't want to be the Grinch that stole Christmas or anything, but you won't find anybody complain more about the Christmas season than me.
Oh,
because I think it is wholly irrational.
Okay.
Borderline idolatrous.
Oh, yeah.
And
I can see that.
I don't quite comprehend how we all volunteer to suspend our lives for like a month. It's like the Christmas season is just growing and growing and growing. It's like never ending now.
Oh, I don't know about you, but like my Christmas tree in my house came up before Halloween.
Oh, man.
And it will probably be up through maybe the end of February, maybe March.
Yeah, depending how lazy you are.
I've got a lot of travel coming up, so maybe I'm going to blame it on that.
Yes. Well, on this show, we wanted to simply review 2024, talk about some of the stuff, Micah, that we've been doing, maybe even talk about the future, what's coming down the pike.
Yeah. So, let's just jump right into it, Emilio. I think one of the biggest things that you've accomplished that I've just kind of been a cheerleader for in you is the Reformed path. And it has been a monumental project. And I've been excited to see it come about, but kind of what is the excitement level that you've had about that one project?
Yes. It is, man. It's exciting for me to develop that. And, I don't know that a whole lot of people out there have been exposed to it yet. If you haven't, just go to the playlist and look up the Reformed Path in the YouTube playlist. But it's definitely the biggest project that we've done on Red Grace Media in a while. And it's something that came out of studying Lane Tipton's book on Van Til and the Trinity. And I just kind of saw, Micah, that as I looked around the Calvinist world today, with a lot of good stuff going on, there's stuff we have problems with and, whatever, but there is a lot of good things going on in the Calvinist world today. And I'm excited that Calvinism and Reformed theology has become popular. Mm-hmm. I celebrate that, but the Reformed path exists, of course, because, I just see discombobulated things, disjointed, unorganized, sort of random kind of stuff. And so I was really excited to be able to bring something together that sought to bring logic and kind of a holistic system to our theology that says, look, it's really not okay to be Calvinist over here and then to be Thomist over here. Yeah. There's no reason for it. So I'm excited that we got this project going, that we were able to record all that. And it all came together really well. I'm working on it nonstop.
Yeah.
We've done 6-7 hours of it, but and then on Christ and Kingdom, we're fleshing it out even further.
Right.
But as far as the written material, maybe we'll talk about that here toward the end.
So is there anything else out there that's like what you've done with Reformed Forum? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no. Yeah. No, I don't think so. And this kind of coincides with what we're going to talk about with Lane Tipton. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything like the Reformed path anywhere on YouTube or the internet. Not that I know of,
right?
Because I don't think there's anybody who is self-consciously trying to organize the subjects that we're hitting into a organic whole. that says your Reformed Trinitarianism has a direct effect on your federalism, your apologetics, everything.
Right.
And so, no, I don't think so, Micah. I don't think there's anything like it anywhere.
Well,
and I'm thankful that, maybe we're making a little bit of a contribution here.
Right. And because I was even watching a YouTube video today of something about eschatology. And if I hadn't listened to your lectures and those conversations about some of the other things about Trinitarianism and biblical theology and all that kind of stuff, I wouldn't have been able to kind of put the things together. So how does someone even grasp what you're trying to say here in the first place? I know you've made it you've broken it down and made it as simple as possible, but kind of what has your method been for making it easy for people to grasp?
Yeah. Some of these concepts are challenging no matter what you do. I mean, you can make them as easy as you can. I don't know that I'm the guy to even try to bring it down to people's everyday level.
Sure.
I think even in preaching and pastoring, practical application maybe was never my strong suit, but, I just want people to understand how that there is a way to be consistent in your Reformed theology, and that we don't need to borrow from other systems of theology to have a theological identity. And so I think if we understand how to properly interact with the theologians, I think that is a way that people can begin to grasp what we're trying to do. It's all right there. And this is like, I'll text Lane and I'll say, brother, it's all right there. And I'll be like reading something from Van Til or Voss or something. And I'm like, they've given it all to us. It's right there. It just needs to be properly retrieved.
Right.
Not a lot of people are doing that. And so now, admittedly, Micah, some of these theologians are challenging, they're demanding, and they're hard to read. And so hopefully we do a little bit of work and we serve the purpose of bridging the gap between I have no clue what Van Til's talking about, to this is what Van Til is saying, and this is why it matters. And hopefully we can bridge the gap a little bit. But, I think putting it in this organized fashion and moving on along these simple topics will help people grasp it.
Yeah. In my kind of circles of life, you're one that talks about Van Til and Voss and all these other guys. I've only met one other person that has mentioned the name Van Til or Voss outside of you and Lane and the Reform Forum guys and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So my next question is kind of like, are you responding to anyone in particular with this series?
Yeah, in a sense I am, because I read so broadly and because I've been around so long, it feels like I've kind of seen a lot, kind of know what's out. Yeah. I kind of know what's out there. I know, the kind of theological tradition. I've come from different theological traditions, in terms of, aligning initially with, let's say, dispensationalism, at least for a good chunk of my life as a Christian, I was classical, evidential, and then I moved more presuppositional. And then when I discovered biblical theology, thanks to Edmund Clowney and the Unfolding Mystery initially, and that kind of led me to G.K. Beale, and then that led me to Voss and Klein. Then I realized that all of this biblical theology that's out there is very popular. There's thousands of titles that are written on this by every seminary has their biblical theologian now, But I started noticing, Micah, like with all the other aspects of the Reformed path, there were attempts to access biblical theology, but there was no fundamental underlying worldview, theology, system, doctrinal system beneath it. It just seemed to me very random and not tied together. And so I wanted to, I'm trying to respond to those who I know are reading certain authors, interacting with certain data, but not understanding how that goes together in the Reformed view, and things like that. And then, of course, it just depends what we're talking about. Eschatology has two aspects. There's eschatology in the broadest subject, and that has to do with anything that has to do with eternity, heaven, glorification, the image of God, all of that. And then there's like eschatology proper, the end times, the second coming, the millennium, things like that. So I am definitely responding polemically and trying to respond to things like pre-mill, post-mill, those dispensationalism, those kinds of things, and trying to show why there's a healthy Reformed alternative to all of those things. So if you are Reformed, I'm going to kind of insult you a little bit, because I'm going to say that Reformed eschatology, strictly speaking, is amillennial. And postmillennialism, in my opinion, is a deviation from received confessional sort of Reformed Orthodoxy. And I understand the role that the Puritans played in postmillennialism, but when you really break down the data, you either have inconsistent postmillennialism, Edwards, Hodge, all of and some of the Puritans that you can find that make statements, or you have what you've heard me talk about many times, Micah, that there's a radical deficiency, church history-wise, radical deficiency in the whole study of eschatology, and confusion all the way up to Voss and Bavinck and the Dutch Reform. There's a ton of confusion where we just don't have good eschatology developed up until that, that point in time.
Gotcha.
And that's why you have radical, weird theology coming out of people like Jonathan Edwards that you're just like, whoa, that's kind of bizarre. His exegesis, his hermeneutics sometimes is wild and allegorical. If you go back to the church fathers, they've got wild interpretations of eschatology as well. So, I would just say, so I'm definitely responding eschatologically to a lot of these different systems. And then today, probably most relevant to Reformed thought is the error of Reconstructionism in all of its in all of its shapes and sizes, theonomy, Christian nationalism, by way of Stephen Wolfe and others, the things that are being pumped out by Moscow and Idaho, Doug Wilson, and those guys that are producing a kind of what I call sort of a kind of political rationalism that is not rooted in authentic exegesis and biblical theology. So,
that kind of answers the question about an argument to other people, but does that answer in the same light the question of like who your target audience for this was?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. Obviously, anyone that will listen, but I would say anyone that has, a background in Reformed theology. The Reformed path is not for people that want to be introduced to Calvinism for the first time. Right. That's not what this is. This is definitely for those that are established in their Reformed thinking and looking to refine and sort of, crystallize what it is that they believe about their Reformed theology. So kind of much the way that, Micah, like people discover Greg Bonson and Van Til, and then they're like, okay, I'm Calvinist, but I haven't really thought about apologetics like that before.
Right.
So how does that crystallize my theology around apologetics? Oh, well, Bonson does a great job of bringing that together for you. And then you discover Van Til, and that maybe even deepens your understanding. So I think my target audience is probably those that have already a background in Reformed theology and are looking to crystallize and refine and bring into greater harmony their theology. I think that's what I would say.
Well, so we've brought the name up several times. It's Lane Tipton, and kind of he's been involved with some of your thinking, and you guys seem to be brothers that are iron sharpening iron, kind of going back and forth, and just you testing out your thinking on certain things, him doing the same to you at times. That's kind of led to some of the things that we've recorded and podcasts between you and him called The Deepest Concepts. Is there a unique place that has had within, or his involvement had within what you're doing here, and kind of why did you kind of bring him along in that process?
Well, I mean, Lane has always been gracious to give me his time. I think Lane is a great theologian. I think he's a great author, good writer, and I think more than anything, Lane is a critical voice in Reformed theology today. And The Deepest Concepts was a playlist that we undertook together to respond to alternatives to what is known as the deeper Protestant conception. That's Gerhardus Voss's understanding of things like creation, grace, and glory, how man is moved from being created in the image of God, how the grace of God affects him, and how he is glorified by God in the end, and what that means. And so it very much has to do with man's nature, his creation, and man's destiny, his glorification. And to understand that there are system-level alternatives to the deeper Protestant conception that come from Thomism, that come from modernism, Karl Barth, that come from evangelicalism, dispensationalism, all of these different concepts of the way that the entire program of creation, grace, and glory are going to be put together. And obviously Gerhardus Voss is writing in response to Thomas and to Robert Bellarmine that developed what they called the deeper Catholic conception. And the deeper Catholic conception, Micah, is at the foundation of Rome's sacramentalism, saved by works, and sacerdotalism, where you are saved by the church. And so this sacramentalism and sacerdotalism is the expression of Thomistic thought that has to do with creation, grace, and glory in Thomas Aquinas. And not a lot of Calvinists know how to put that stuff together. And it's one of my great discoveries, and really surprised that a lot of people that you think of in your mind that when you think of Reformed theology, whoever the names are, big names, local names, whatever, they know nothing about this stuff.
Right.
It's kind of shocking. I can give you some really good Reformed systematic theology books. They won't deal with any of this, and yet, in true to our playlist, these are the deepest concepts.
Right.
And these deepest concepts, because what are we doing? What are we doing on this playlist? What Lane Tipton and I are doing, mainly Lane, because we're just working on his material and what we discuss, but we're contrasting conceptions. And these are ultimate conceptions, Micah.
Right.
This is the difference between true and false religion, heaven and hell. You're saved or you're not saved. I mean, this is not a joke.
Wow.
This is when we're dealing with these issues, it's like R.C. Sproul getting on the desk and getting in J.I. Packer's face and telling him, this is about whether you go to heaven or hell.
Yeah.
Ecumenicalism is not an option. We can't join hands with Rome. And so hopefully these deepest conceptions and contrasting them will help people to see why.
So, other than the fact that you get to talk to your buddy Lane and you get to have this fun with him and going into these deep conversations that I like to say my eyes go screensaver on,
Yeah.
Why does this subject matter to you so much?
Because when you have different controversies surrounding justification, when you have controversies surrounding the doctrine of sin, Pelagianism, when you have controversies that have to do with sola scriptura versus sola ecclesia, what very few people understand is that at the very core, at the very foundation of all those popular topics are these issues of grace, nature grace, which what does that mean? What was natural to Adam and what was added to Adam's nature. Rome has their view of that. Reformed have our view of that. And then creation, grace, and glory in what Thomas talks about as far as an Exodus Redditus movement. How man comes from God in creation and returns to God in glory, and that is rooted in Thomas's Trinitarian theology. And at that point right there, yeah, Micah, you might go screensaver, but it's one of those things where if we cannot elucidate the Exodus Redditus scheme of Rome, our theologians, our pastors and real thinkers on theology and Reformed theology are at a massive disadvantage and will not know how to comprehensively respond to that very, very deep, profound theology of Thomas. It is profound. And people can walk away from Thomas's writings and be very swayed. Right. Be very swayed by Thomas on these issues. And it will not be until possibly it's too late that they know what went wrong in the process. And so what Lane and I are trying to do is to show people this is what's going to go wrong in the process. If you don't understand the Exodus Redditus eschatology of Thomas, if you don't understand nature, grace, you're in some very dangerous territory. You're interacting with some different stuff.
Right. So is that really fully applicable to a pew sitter, or is it more applicable to the pastor who is trying to unpack these ideas in the pulpit?
I always tell people the example of the new perspective on Paul, right? If you went up to the typical person, new perspective on Paul, they don't know what on earth you're talking about. Right. Okay. But if you understand that the writings of N.T. Wright, James Dunn, E.P. Sanders, and many others, you understand the havoc that has caused at the level of seminary and Bible colleges, where professors the world over are now readjusting their doctrine of justification based on the new perspective of N.T. Wright, that will trickle down to the church. Already has.
Right.
Already has.
Yeah, I've seen
I believe Doug Wilson, for example, is influenced by that view of N.T. Wright and Federal Vision theology, quite frankly, borrowing from new perspective thought. And it has caused massive division in the church. So yes, it affects the person in the pew, even if they don't know how or why.
Well, let's change topics a little bit. I want to talk about, kind of go back to what we were talking about with the Reformed path, and kind of a little bit of what you've been doing with the Christ and Kingdom podcast. But first things first, let's talk about who is this Mike Tean joker that you've been talking to, and why is it not me? What is it about this friendship that you have with Mike that really everybody needs to know about?
Definitely wouldn't be. I've had enough of you, so it wouldn't be you.
There you go.
No, Mike Tean is just a good friend, a dear friend. I've known Mike Tean for many, many years. We go back to Calvary Chapel days together and stuff like that. He actually, not too long ago, because of Reformed theology, has moved from his old Calvary Chapel pastoring days and finally became a pastor of a Calvinist church, and has been really developing his Reformed theology as well. But it's really just that Mike Tean is someone I trust.
Right.
Mike Tean is somebody that I like and that, sharpens me, and hopefully I sharpen him. And, we get along, and we both love Reformed theology, and we're both kind of on the same wavelength on a lot of these issues, right. Even though sometimes, he insists that I'm kind of bringing him along on a lot of these things, but other than that, I think we work well together, and he is very serious about theology, and so I respect that about him, and he's a great pastor, right. And so if I was in Orange County, California, I'd probably go to Mike Tean's church, and so no, we've known each other forever. And I hope that we just continue to do stuff. Maybe he can even jump on YouTube with us occasionally.
Oh, something that I've been trying to get him to do, or you to allow him to do.
Yeah.
But yes, I do realize that you and Mike have been friends for a long time. And what I love about listening to the Christ and Kingdom podcast is that you and he actually talk on, although he says that, he's dragging, or you're dragging him along. You guys talk at a very peer-to-peer level, in a lot of it, absolutely much more than I could. And so in one of those things, what you've done is you've taken the Reformed path and you've really just slowed it down. I think what we typically do is like an hour and 20 minutes typically on one subject, but you guys are breaking it down and slowing it down and like really getting in depth about that. Why did you guys choose to do that? Yeah. Even though I love it and agree with it.
Yeah, no, I think we've disciplined ourselves pretty well to stick to an hour format.
Which is strange for you.
We just recorded the third installment of Reformed Biblical Theology.
Okay.
We went a little over an hour for that one because we had to cram there toward the end. Honestly, we could do 6 hours for each subject. I mean, it just goes on and on. But I just felt like I needed a platform where I can slow down. I don't have to rush. I don't have to feel like I'm under some constraint by for our YouTube channel, in the sense that we can just go slow, break it down, go chunk by chunk, piece by piece, not rush anything, and kind of fill in the blanks. And Mike is real good at asking those questions. Like, what about this? What about that? And it's probably questions that a lot of people are going to have.
Right.
So I try to fill them in and try to do the best I can to explain, what it is. Because I can make a statement like, this is about nature and grace, and then just keep going. And like, wait a minute. What does that even mean? Like, what are you even talking about? So, hopefully we're filling in a lot of the blanks for people there.
Yeah. So maybe after you guys get done with the Reformed Path stuff, what are some of the other topics that you guys are going to be tackling on Christ and Kingdom?
Yeah. Well, you know what, Micah? I told Mike, like, we have to do the Reformed Path.
Right.
I got to get this off my chest. We got to do 3 hours for every subject. But, so we're not going to deviate. I've been so tempted, Micah, to speak to this issue and speak to that issue. And I'd just be like, no, I'm blocking everything out. Just for now, I'm just blocking everything out, and I'm focusing, and I'm not going to get distracted by the culture or the controversies or whatever. And I'm just going to focus on the Reformed Path stuff. But yes, once we're done, I mean, there's a lot of topics I want to get back to. I want to come back to the new apologetic stuff. I want to really spend time, Micah, raising the alarm and talking about an issue that I've talked about here already multiple times on this channel, about what I call externalism, that I think is a major problem in our culture right now moving forward. I think it is absolutely influenced by the Trump election. I think Trump getting elected has given rise and popularity to something that we think is good, namely conservatism, because that means then liberalism is not going to run wild.
Right.
But conservatism can produce externalism more than liberalism can. Right. Let me explain that. Let me explain that in a very simple way. You know, my wife and I, we moved to Texas in 2007, something like that. Well, living in California my whole life and then coming to Texas was a bit of a culture shock. Of course, not just because of the tornadoes, the tornado sirens, but also because in California, it is very much black and white. You're either a Christian or absolutely not a Christian.
Yep.
Right? But you come to the Bible Belt, and some people have called Texas the buckle on the Bible Belt, and everyone is quote unquote Christian.
That's right.
And let me tell you, when you're ministering in a nominal externalist, let me put it bluntly, false conversion context, that is hard ground, Micah.
Right.
It is really hard ground to, you know, you've heard it said, you got to get them unsaved before you get them saved.
Yeah.
You got to show people that really think they're saved just because they grew up in a Christian home, they were homeschooled, their daddy's a preacher, whatever, automatically they're saved. And it's like, that is hard evangelism. That's hard ministry. It can be very frustrating because everyone around you thinks they're Christian. Well, in this sort of, conservative republicanism on the rise, everyone's saying, God bless you. There's Catholic advertisement everywhere right now.
Yes,
I'm sure you've seen it.
Yes,
it's everywhere. And people are celebrating that to the point of, hey, there's kind of an attitude, there's an ethos that is descending on our culture that says, hey, don't complain because it's conservative now, so just accept it. Who cares if it's Catholic? It's Christ, it's Jesus. That's all you need to know. And it's like, no, that's not all we need to know. There's a reason why the Reformation exists.
Right.
It's because Protestants identified the Roman Catholic Church as being devoid of the gospel. And so externalism is a big problem that we need to deal with. And that, going back to the new apologetics, talking about AI, the singularity is drawing near. What does that really mean? Those kinds of things. The West is becoming increasingly Eastern. The implications of that kind of worldview. There's just so much to get to.
Well, so you're kind of skirting around this, but like, how is it that you pick some of the topics that we come over? Because I do not hardly ever get an opportunity to speak into it. But what is it that what's the criteria that you put together for the topics that we discuss?
Well, Micah, one of the things I appreciate about you and what you're doing for me in helping me with all of this is giving me the opportunity to speak to things that are truly a burden to me, that are truly, I pick topics not because they're clickbait and they're catchy and they're easy targets. I mean, I can just do video after video after video on prosperity preachers and get thousands and thousands and, if not millions of views. Right. And then I'd be a complete sellout because I have no interest in that garbage, right? I'm not interested in clickbait stuff. I'm not interested in the views. I'm interested in what's important. And to me, exposing the Jungian psychology of Jordan Peterson is far more important than talking about Creflo Dollar's airplane or something. I could care less about that. But this, because, I want to talk about things that are relevant, yes, but I also want to talk about issues I really care about. I really believe in what I'm talking about. And so I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's got to really burden me. I have to care about it. I got to believe in it. And it's usually something that I identify as a real serious threat.
Has there been anything in something? There's been a lot of stories that's hit major news networks, that's hit just the kind of the Christian ecosphere of things. Is there anything that's been out there that you've like wanted to tackle, but you just didn't because it would look too much, it would look like piling on? And I know that that's not your thing. Is there a reason that you have behind that kind of like latching on to things and just piling on? I mean, you kind of laid it out a little bit with the Creflo Dollar, the Kenneth Copeland, all that kind of stuff. It seems like everybody's talking about that, but what is the main reason why you don't tackle those things?
Again, Micah, it's just because it's something I have to believe in. I've got to be really genuinely burdened by it. And I can't just run around like a theological ambulance chaser. You know what I mean? I can't do that. I won't do that. But at the same time, Micah, I'm open, and I've told you this in the past. Like I do definitely want to address relevant, current issues, again, that I think are meaningful to the church, to believers. They may be political, they may be cultural, they may be economic, they may be, whatever. But I think at the end of the day, I want to do gospel ministry. I want to bring the gospel to bear on all of these different conversations. And so, I can get into the details of heavy theology, and that's my heart, and that's what I want to do. If, put me on a deserted island, I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine, Micah, if I have Voss and Bavinck and Klein and, these kind of men, and Calvin, and I'm just reading my books that I love. But I recognize the world out here. I recognize the threat that is around us in many ways. And so I have no problem, addressing some of those issues. They just have to be meaningful, and they have to be indicative of something larger.
Right.
It can't just be one cultural moment that I have to care about.
Right. Well,
because they come and go so fast.
Right. But so in kind of transitioning a little bit, one of the things that you've mentioned a little bit before, and I think that we really need to tackle in the new year, is this heavy push that I don't know if it's the RCC is coming out with, or it's just members of RCC are coming out with, and, like, hey, everybody's turning Catholic. And it seems like there's a little bit of a political movement for that to happen as well. But what are some of the major concerns that you see with even the church in 2025 and just the 21st century kind of moving forward?
Yeah. Well, some of this goes back to the new apologetics material, where I talk about the fact that, I don't think the future of Christian apologetics has to do with Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Roman Catholicism, and all of that. Well, I don't know about those Christian cults, but I know Roman Catholicism will continue to be relevant, apparently. We'll have to see what happens with Rome on two different levels, culturally, and then, in a sense, institutionally, like the Pope.
Right.
The Pope, just recently gave an announcement that there was going to be a pilgrimage, a Jubilee pilgrimage for LGBTQ people to go to Rome and receive a blessing. Okay. Where is Rome going in that sort of crazy, deconstructed kind of way?
Yeah.
And then what is the influence of Eastern Orthodoxy? That's another major thing that we have to be concerned with. I recently read an article, I forgot what news outlet it was in, Politico, or I don't know, it was some news outlet that talked about Eastern Orthodoxy is now the masculine man's religion.
Yep.
And what they were talking about is that people go to Eastern Orthodoxy because they want to get away from the eroticism of evangelicalism. Jesus is my boyfriend.
Yeah, I think that was actually in Vanity Fair.
Yeah. Okay. Probably. Yeah. So then it's all about like, Christian concerts and this kind of romantic, kind of dim the lights. You're at a concert, and you create this sort of immersive, charismatic, Pentecostal kind of feely kind of religion.
It's a great article.
And it's like, how many concerts can we have like that? How dark can you dim the lights? How many little candles can you light? How much of the mood can you physically set? Like, people are done with that. And, how many skinny jean, worship leaders can you tolerate before you want to be a man? You know what I mean? And not use feminine tones. I mean, this is where we're at. And, it's sad that you would say people are now flipping over to Eastern Orthodoxy because it's historical, yep, and they presume to be apostolic, and they give you rituals, and it's very ecclesial and communal and all of that. And so we have to respond to that. And Eastern Orthodoxy is a huge problem. Not a lot of Christian theologians are writing on it. Not a lot of Christian theologians want to speak out against it. They don't want to focus on it because it's a whole nother tradition and body and history, and people are just unfamiliar. And yet it's going nowhere. It's staying right here, and we have to be prepared to deal with Eastern Orthodoxy because it is a synergistic religion, just like Rome. God and man cooperate for salvation. It's Arminian, and the Reformed can't tolerate it, and so we've got to deal with that. Absolutely.
Well, but what has the Calvinist Church, the Reformed Church, been doing that is even making waves in pushing back against that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. There hasn't been enough material that has been, books that have been written, material that has been, lectures that have been delivered, theologians that are willing to devote their lives to the study of this issue, like many apologists were devoted to Islam, right? And that issue, you just have, I would venture to say, Micah, we're witnessing here in the early 21st century, we are witnessing a very serious spirit of ecumenicalism. It's real, mm-hmm, and it's around us, and it is not far from us, and it's right before us, and we have to be very, very sober-minded right now.
But would I be mistaken in categorizing it in that the higher thought has been put out there? The Churtons, the Bavinks, the Van Tils, the Voss, all those guys, but it really hasn't seeped into the popular culture of the Reformed Church.
Mm-hmm. Well, no. I mean, the thing is that, this is part of the problem, is that this is the Reformed path. This is the deepest concepts. What are we talking about here? We're talking about retrieving Reformed theology and Reformed theologians. You know what I'm saying? We have to retrieve the theologians you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Calvin, Turretin, Bevink, Voss, Van Til, and many others, notwithstanding Warfield, Hodge, the confessional traditions. We have to be devoted to retrieving that. But right now there's a retrieval movement that is seeking to retrieve or resource Roman Catholic tradition, Thomistic, Scholastic, Peter Lombard, and in some instances, Eastern Orthodox. In this idea that there is this great tradition out there that is woven through the centuries and that's ecumenical in nature, and that we all need to be connected to it.
Right.
And so this is an area that I think the Reformed have to be extremely careful with right now, what's going on. And I'm thankful for Lane Tipton because he is right now championing a very serious Reformed alternative to that spirit right there. So, it will only become, if as Reformed folk, if we do not know how to responsibly, all the way from the level of scholarship to pastoral ministry, mm-hmm, if we do not responsibly understand how to retrieve this theology, Reformed Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, and Eastern Orthodoxy, they will absolutely continue to increase in popularity, and we will see ecumenicalism turn into apostasy. No doubt.
Well, that's a pretty, that's a great thing to kind of mull over and meditate over and figure out, what each and one of our parts have been to, because there's a popular influencer that I follow in kind of the political sphere who is Catholic, and I respect a lot of his political thinkings, but he's always trying to push this idea that the Roman Church is this ancient thing that's just been around forever, and it's the source of even all of our Protestantism, and how we even kind of look at that and listen to what he says and kind of just pull out the good things, but then throw away what he says about that. And you can say something about that, but I kind of wanted to shift the conversation a little bit and kind of just talk about like what's up for 2025. What are we doing? Are we doing more media projects? Have you been writing the books that I've been telling you need to write? What's going on there?
Yes, I am. I'm actually writing a lot. I'm writing, I don't want to say daily. I'm writing consistently because I'm also reading right now. And so I'm in a reading mode. I'm working through things, right, on a lot of issues, and definitely related to the Reformed Path material. I think that's a book that needs to be written. I think probably even a follow-up to that book someday will be what we did on the Reformed Path playlist, which, if you remember, I did one more. I don't know if you remember, Micah, but I did one more episode. Remember it was called Experiential Theology. Yeah. Basically how to walk the Reformed Path. And so kind of all of this in application. And I think I need to refine that much more. I think I need to develop that way further and really talk about how do we actually walk the Reformed path? What does this look like in real time? And how does it practically affect us and things like that? And so, writing projects, that's something I'm, transitioning. This is what I wanted to make a note of, is transitioning from pastoral ministry to full-time media ministry. One of the dynamics of that is that I'm no longer under the burden of what John MacArthur called the tyranny of Sunday, right? Where all week long you're under the burden of that sermon, and the labor that goes, and especially for me, the labor that goes into the hours of memorization I used to commit every week to in terms of sermon preparation and things like that, transitioning to media ministry and things like that really has freed up, time for me to focus on these writing projects and think about different media projects and things like that. Hopefully you and I will film some stuff, if nothing more, maybe some in-person conversations like this that you and I can have. And maybe cut in some B-roll and things like that. But man, just developing these issues at some point here, Micah. I don't know how many people out there remember me talking. I got a lot of people that reached out to me on this, but I lost a file with a major writing project on AI and the new apologetics and things like that. I don't know how much of a choice I will have in the coming decade to put that off. It's kind of a nightmare to even think about going back, starting from scratch, redoing material. That's just, my mind doesn't like that. Like, if I lose something, I lost it, it's done. Don't ask me to redo it. But I don't know that I'm going to get a choice, because the CBDC system is out there. It is coming. Implantable technology is coming fast. The merger between software and hardware by way of super intelligent robotics is coming. I've recently seen some robotic videos that I have not seen, and we're almost at the point where I'm predicting. I don't make a lot of predictions, but I'll make one right here. And I've already said this in the past, but I think one of the next things that's coming, Micah, is we're going to have another iPhone moment.
Okay.
Steve Jobs came out on that stage. He presented the iPhone. It took everybody's breath away. The world had never seen that. The ability to have a supercomputer in your hand. And I think the world is getting ready to see, probably in the next 10 years, a super intelligent, and that's just metaphorical. Super intelligence is a technical term for on the scale of AI. But I'm just talking about a very intelligent, probably AGI, artificial general intelligence, an AGI that has been married to a robot. So software, hardware coming together and coming out on stage or somehow, and it will be terrifying. And that's probably going to happen in our lifetime. And I just don't know if the world is actually truly ready for that. And, ChatGPT is only going to get smarter. I just watched a robotics video of a robot's hand with dexterity that is almost human level.
Wow.
And, when you think about the literal race toward implantable technology, there's a lot of companies now that have Outpaced Nurlink. And, what is that going to look like? What's that going to mean? Some people say this is all just alarmist. This is all just paranoia. And it would be paranoia if we didn't have the books that were written. But the books are written, the books by Ray Kurzweil, Max Moore, Damian Broderick, Werner Vinge, all of these guys, even former Google guys, Mo Gadot, Mustafa Suleiman. These guys are all writing on these issues, and they are doing two things. They're saying, don't panic, it could be really great. And they're saying, we might all be dead. This is insane. This is our world. So obviously, as a Christian, we have a worldview. We don't fear global annihilation because of the plan of God.
Right.
God has a plan. There's an eschatology. Our eschatology is not just theoretical. It's actual. It's real. And so the world cannot annihilate itself through Terminator or Skynet or whatever. It's going to be here until the end, until Christ comes to judge the living and the dead. But what will happen up to that point and how that will affect the church as you see this radical technology being married to the socioeconomic system of the world, I don't know. More work has to happen on that stuff moving forward. And I'm still waiting for the church to catch up. I still am waiting for G3 or Shepherd's Conference or Gospel Coalition or whoever, I don't even care who you are, to put this at the front of the conference, not at the back. And, room 103 in the back, some guy talking to 15 people, but put it up front and get somebody that is devoted to actually reading the material, the sources, right. And responding to it comprehensively.
So I need to point out that I was with you all along in the loss of that file. I still don't understand how it is that you managed to lose that file, but unless you have made just awful decisions since I last hooked it up, I have made a way for you to never lose anything ever again. And I'm looking out for you. Okay.
You're trying.
So
you can only do so much,
but I can only do so much.
That's right.
There's only so much that you allow me to do with, without Google or Apple or whoever, intruding on every bit of your data.
That's right.
So, but what today is different about you than, say, 10, 12, 8, whatever, how many years ago? Why has God placed you in this certain place right now? And why is this the right opportune time?
Hopefully, just refining my thinking on Reformed theology. I think that we all go through a theological journey, and no matter what level you're at, you're going through some kind of theology journey. And for me, it has been kind of the journey towards a more holistic way of thinking about Reformed theology, instead of just thinking of Reformed theology in terms of certain attractive topics like Calvinism or the sovereignty of God, or whatever, predestination or justification or something like that, or the authority of Scripture, or even just thinking, you know what, I'm just going to think about apologetics. I'm just doing apologetics. I'm just going to respond to cults and false religions, and thinking, no, actually, I'm thinking far more now comprehensively. So, like, I have a friend that I tell people his focus is on Islam. And I tell folks he is the one guy I know who thinks almost exclusively in global terms. He doesn't think in American terms, Western terms. He's not just thinking about his church. He thinks in global categories, like, all the time. Now, plus and minuses to that, I don't know, but I think that's kind of what's happened to me in terms of theology. I kind of have transitioned away from thinking about just select aspects of doctrine and thinking more comprehensively in terms of my theology. And the Reformed Path material could not have come together 10 years ago. Impossible.
Gotcha.
Impossible. I would never be able to do that. I would never be able to identify the relevant issues. Obviously, I'm not like I've arrived or anything like that, but I think I've distilled it through the years. I've kind of identified now where things, where the critical issues really are, and what will make or break your theology in terms of Reformed theology. So hopefully I've gotten a little bit wiser.
Well, in that wisdom, have you determined what the next big playlist like the Reformed Path is going to be on the channel?
Yeah. Yes. I've hinted at it a couple times here and there, but, I'm working through a theological journal on postmillennialism. And so I think, talk about the 21st century moving forward and whatnot, as far as theology goes, I'm critical of postmillennialism. The ultimate reason why I'm critical of postmillennialism is not just, because I think it's unbiblical, but I think, Micah, that it gives a reckless, irresponsible, ultimately just unfounded false hope to the church. And I mean, you can read books by Doug Wilson, where he claims God is going to save the world. And so that switches your view of things after you've read the Bible and you've read statements about many are called, but few are chosen.
Right.
The road is broad and easy, leads to destruction, and many go that way. And the road that leads to life is difficult and narrow, and few will be there that find it, right? We are a remnant. We are an elect remnant, right? God has chosen us out of the world. All this language, and then all the pilgrim theology that comes with that, that's all been sort of, glossed over. And now the church is somehow pumped up on this false notion that we're going to witness the salvation of the entire world. And that's what I call virtual universalism. Yeah. Universalism is heresy.
Right.
That you believe that everyone will be saved, no exceptions. That's heresy. That's you. Those are universalist cults that believe that kind of thing. Okay, annihilationism and things like that even is false. But to go around telling people that the Asionic passages, the passages out of Isaiah that seem to describe the world full of the glory of God, that refers to this earth, this age, this world, in this dimension, is radically misguided. And the fact that that's being proffered to the Reformed Church, and that a lot of young, Reformed brethren are buying into that system of a false, exaggerated eschatology, is very alarming. And so I'm going to be doing a series, a playlist. You talk about a playlist. We'll see what we call it. But I'm going to be breaking down a theology journal, and doing, I don't know, maybe 7, 10 videos that will very critically interact with the contents of that journal and scripture. So
very good.
I think it'll be the most comprehensive thing on the internet.
Well, that's a positive. Of course, I come from a pre-mill, upbringing and just thought pattern and all that kind of stuff. And so I've been kind of just kind of following along because I don't really understand the post-mill, and I'm learning from you, and I'm trying to unwind myself from the premillennial mindset. And so I think that especially whenever it comes to the Reformed idea and the Reformed standard, you could say, of amillennialism, postmillennium goes completely against some of the things that we find in the holistic nature of the gospel and what Christ is trying to do from beginning to end, in that whole thing. So I think it's going to be a really, really great thing for us to be tackling, really more so you to be tackling and me to kind of just be joining along with you in 2025. So,
yeah.
Well,
awesome.
That kind of wraps up our kind of year in review and what we've done. I think the Reformed path has been, I think it's been the hallmark of what you've accomplished over 2024. I think moving that into and unpacking that even further into Christ and Kingdom has been a real big blessing for those of us who need it unpacked even further, and you going into depth on a whole lot of other things. And I do look forward to this post-millennial conversation and these more practical and more things that kind of is just applicable to everybody in the RCC, the Eastern Orthodox, those conversations for 2025.
Yeah. Amen. Lord willing, we'll do this and that.
Yeah. We might not get to all of it, but we'll get to a lot of it.
That's right.
So,
well, great. Micah, thanks for jumping in and joining and sticking around, and appreciate you for all you've done for Reg Race Media in 2024, and hopefully this coming year we'll do way better stuff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Awesome, dude.
All right, man.
All right, everybody, God bless. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you guys next time.